Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back after another long week of Force of Will to the Teacher's Lounge, your favorite ever live Force of Will podcast featuring myself, Jeremy Franklin, and Ryan Miles.
The beard's gone.
Brandon Bremont.
Stream brought to you by Cool Ranch Doritos.
And Frank Klosser.
Hello.
Sandwich.
So apparently tonight is the time that we're eating during our lunch break, but or dinner break, I should say. But before we get started, we want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Odyssey Games, as well as all of the patrons and members here on YouTube for helping make this possible. If you want to consider supporting the channel, you can go ahead and do it in a lot of ways. Links down below in the description, as well as possibly click that join button, which is right down below, which, for those of you who don't know, we have 22 slots left. The next 22 people to join on YouTube as a member. Huge thanks to Force of Malaysia for this hookup. I've got a massive supply of will coins, ranging from some of the gender bend ones to the normal, to the swimsuit, to lapis cluster, to Rhea cluster, to I've got all kinds of stuff. But the next 22 people to join will be sent a random will coin in addition to all the other
he
perks
taunts
that come
us
with it.
with the whole Kaguya family back together again, and Gil Papa dying in the background for its transgressions.
There you go.
So all of that stuff is possible for the next 22 people to sign up for the membership. So go ahead and click that join button if you're interested. It goes to support the channel, helps us get better equipment, get to more events, do all kinds of crazy cool stuff. So thank you guys so much. We also have that new Gil Lapis emoji that you can make use of too in the chat. So let's go ahead and jump right in with that out of the way. This has been, I was talking with Brandon a little bit beforehand about this has been a very interesting format in Force of Will, is because specifically that we have had 3 going on 4, gonna be 5 GPs all within the same set of cards. And weirdly enough, this has been kind of the first time where even within that format, there's been a lot of actual changing of what the meta looks like in terms of small shifts in terms of what comes out on top, what the meta calls make it out to be, and stuff like that. So with that in mind, we're going to kind of talk about what it's been like in this current meta and how to kind of take advantage of what that looks like in terms of when you're thinking about testing and what's in for later. So ultimately, we're thinking about calling this one the Hakuna Matata.
So much better.
Generous.
That was great.
So with that, let's go ahead and dig in. So Ryan, you kind of did, you kind of had the most experience about the most recent shift. We had our conversation about what we thought was going to win, and then
Yep.
you went to the event where that we saw that shift happen. So do you want to talk about kind of your experience in terms of how you were thinking about what shifts were happening and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think the expectation of the meta was going to be mostly Gil and Hanzo focused. So we did see a complete rise in the play of Lucifer, not only in North Carolina last weekend, but again in Italy this weekend, where we were talking about how the Jeanne d'Arc decks were going to farm Gil a little bit, how Lucifer in general does really well against Hanzo. So we did see Lucifer was the most represented at both of these events, which was pretty cool, which of course shifts the format to a slower, control-oriented as a whole. And then I think as we go further, we're going to have this terrible, terrible time where people are going to think it's okay to play Kirik and Ayu again. And I mean, what can you really do about that? It's just kind of where it's going to cycle around. But it is just this rotating wheel of, okay, well, what are we allowed to play now? What's too greedy? What's not greedy enough? That kind of stuff. So we did see Gil win both events overall, despite the presence of Lucifer, which is kind of funny, which means I think that Gil is really figuring out how to deal with Lucifer in an effective way. It might just be the best deck, which is why machines are going to take over the format, mark my word. But no, it was interesting to see it slow down as we were kind of talking about it, expecting it to happen.
I would also point out that I did say that I definitely thought that Lucifer had a spot, had a chance, and it did take 3 of the top 8. Is that my microphone making all that weirdness?
I think it's Brandon.
Mine?
Just turn on and push to talk or something.
No, I just turned down my sensitivity a bit. Is that any better?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
Hello, hello.
Yep.
It's definitely
Audio
your
is bad.
microphone.
Audio is bad. Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Little
Anywho.
Judo Brandon just constantly 3D something in the background.
Yeah.
It also might just be the fact that I'm just constantly shuffling cards.
Yeah, so let's talk about this, right? About now that we've had 3 very distinct events, what is it about, like, how do you take this into testing, thinking about what step the meta might take? Like, in terms of, you know, we talked before going into this format about, is it going to take a step forward or a step back? Where, like, Pandas in my mind was like, is it going to take a step backwards in the sense that it's going to be very reactive to what happened, and therefore we're going to see a lot of Lucifer and stuff like that because that's kind of a hard counter? Or are we going to see something that pushes ahead where it just, like, isn't necessarily geared to beat Pandas, but it just has a shored up defense to make sure that it's not going to fall victim to the same way the previous meta did?
So kind of.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my apologies. We call this the Princess Brides game, named after an old movie wherein 2 players have 2 cups, one of which is poisoned, and one gets placed in front of another player, and the other player can choose whether or not to switch the positions of the cup, and then the other person has to consider whether they would rather have the cup be in front of them, and then would they know the cup's in front of them, and then would they know, and it kind of just piles up on top of each other. Well, the meta is kind of the same way. You look at, there's a bunch of Lucifers that top the event. Everyone knows that Luke Keurig is a good matchup against Lucifer. So I'm going to beat that meta and play Keurig. Well, they all know that I'm going to try and beat that meta and play Keurig, so I'm going to play Brunhild or Hanzo or a deck that beats Keurig. Well, everyone knows I'm going to do that, so now I'm back on Lucifer. And it just keeps piling up on top of itself, so you kind of have to make a guess about where everyone else is going to land on that cycle of predicting what everyone else is going to play. Typically, with Force of Will, you're pretty safe going just the one step above. I'm guessing there's just going to be a ton of Keurigs in Minnesota. I don't think people are going to take it too many steps farther than that. And so it's probably pretty safe to play a deck that beats Keurig. But who knows? It really is up in the air.
It is kind of interesting because, like, we did see Lucifer kind of come out preemptively in my mind. Like, Lucifer doesn't, like, it doesn't seem like that. I guess it is that one step up where, like, the decks that were winning events weren't actually like yeah, Pandas was there, but I don't think people were actually scared of Pandas. It just felt like that Hanzo was the real target because there was a lot of, like, Jizo statue hate being around too. And I think Lucifer just kind of accidentally hit Pandas as well, and that might have been why it was so popular. But I was actually pretty surprised to see that much. I was expecting more of just playing the best deck, playing the Hanzo, playing even the Pandas. But Pandas didn't get to see any play at all, which I was actually kind of surprised about.
There was one takeaway at Charlotte.
So again, like Brandon said, this is sort of like picking things, but like I would note the trend so far has been like every time there's been sort of a known best deck going into things. Vegas, known or accepted best deck and accepted deck to beat was Brunhild, and we saw Vegas dominated by a bunch of Hanzos that were specifically there to beat Brunhild, and then topped by this one deck that was like tooled to beat both. And then going into these last couple events, we're like, okay, we've seen that Hanzo's got what it takes, and now it can adapt a little bit, and we expect it to be like this Hanzo and Gil fighting each other. And then we saw that them both show up, them both perform well, but we also saw them being capped off by Lucifer in this case, there to beat them. So unfortunately, if this gets around too much, it will defeat the entire purpose of this prediction. But I would almost bet that we're going to see a whole ton of Keurigs and Knights and other aggressive decks in Minnesota, and then a bunch of decks there to beat them. And then we're going to, like, the thing's going to get won by a random Hanzo that's not bad against aggro decks, but beats all the decks that beats aggro decks as well.
About right.
Yeah, I think that's the crazy thing thinking about it. The other thing, too, is Minneapolis is probably going to be close to 100, maybe even 110 attendance-wise, simply because of its accessibility, the hype that, like, even the last major event, the last WGPQ from there, got like 95 players, and now this time, even on top of that, it has a pseudo paid invite to Worlds, plus my mic is low apparently, plus a bunch of other stuff going on. So I think I tried to fix it. I think it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, Brandon. Like
Me?
yeah. Whenever you're quiet, it's like trying to pick up your voice, and it gets like super loud when you're quiet. So you might want to turn on push to talk for that.
Super loud, quiet.
Yeah, like it catches your computer fan when you stop talking because it's looking for a voice.
I'll turn down sensitivity again. Hopefully, that sounds
So,
better.
It'll be interesting to see how that meta, that Princess Brides game, right, goes when we also are like almost probably going to be double attendance from the last one. So like Vegas to Charlotte was pretty similar attendance-wise. Like it was a little bit of small, which to also I think is another really interesting point, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But like now we're going to be jumping from a smaller event where we've seen a step to now we get into that Princess Bride game going into the next. So I think in talking about if I was to be testing, right, going about Princess Bride stepping, I kind of like knowing that it's going to be such a big event by comparison, I almost want to be keeping my skills sharp on that one step ahead, but also pretty actively looking at 2 steps ahead. Like I think there's definite merit to going into that experimentative route of like, well, if you do this, I'm going to do this, but you know I'm going to do that, so then I'm going to do this instead kind of thing. I think there's merit going into this event in doing that much digging, which means your testing is going to look a lot different than if you were just looking to test against the results of Charlotte.
Well, of course, your optimal testing is to find something that beats everything. I mean, if you can do what you're saying, if that is even possible, then that's what we want to do. The assumption that we're coming to is that at this point the meta is more or less understood. I never am going to sell it out completely, but I think that for the most part we have the decks that are in consideration, and they mostly create a pretty solid loop with each other. So
sure,
hopefully we'll see. Yeah, I'd love to see it broken. I really would, but at this point I'm thinking it's really just going to be a prediction of what everyone else brings, and then you bring the thing that pretty handily beats it.
Yeah, for sure.
We did have a question in the chat, which was if we expect any outliers, and I think we may see some things that look odd if you look at a very superficial level, because I think we might see some outliers that are like modifications on the existing deck to try and basically maintain whatever their position in the pyramid is while trying to break above them in some significant way. So, for example, we may see, this one's going to be a wild prediction, but we may see some black deck that's like, okay, the discard plus etc. package is very powerful and has this good spot in the meta. Is there a way I can make an adjustment that lets it spike a match that's currently bad for the moment? And so we could see what looks on paper like, oh, it's this wild and out there deck, when it's really like a 10 to 15% change to try and just like basically it's playing the same core deck and just trying to like do something a little different to try and win.
Yeah, so
would be like one of the popular ones, ideas that's been around for a while but hasn't had any traction and just may not have legs, is like, what if you switch over to Rhea game 1, so you have this more you can come out even more aggressive and then shift to control like the slower game when it matters. Something like that, where you're still playing mostly the same deck, but you have found some angle to give it a different lane of attack.
Yeah, so I think we kind of joked about it last time, but I've actually kind of tested with it a little bit more. And we even kind of talked about it a little bit before the podcast started, in terms of something that could be experimented with as something to beat what people are planning to bring, is I would want to actually experiment a little bit with Lich and seeing if there's a way to make Lich a 50-50 against Keurig. Specifically because when you're playing against decks like, sure, Hanzo has his Master Rune, right, which is the thing that you still have to accept that you might have to deal with, but there are definitely some cards that you can do to kind of bait out the Master Rune a little bit. But also, against Brunhild, Lich is like Spectre Rush plus Cycle of Death is actually pretty potent. I've played some games in it, and especially since one of them is instant speed, so you can like have some leftover will, cast Cycle of Death, and then cast Spectre Rush. Brunhild, so let's think about the common things that Brunhild is playing right now in terms of removal, in terms of punishes, is pretty much protection of the angels and sometimes miscalculation. Like, they're not necessarily doing as the full playset of miscalcs like they used to, right? So they don't actually have a ton of stuff to be able to respond to an attack. And
well, the miscalc doesn't even save it. Miscalc still triggers.
Exactly. Right. It'll still make sure that they have to actually lose a creature. So you can actually get to a point, especially since these games can get kind of grindy back and forth, and a lot of the darkness creatures have a lot of staying power that like Brunhild can't necessarily deal with. So you're like both building these board states, as we've talked about before with Brunhild, where Lich can suddenly be like, oh, surprise, one-sided final battle, now here's lethal. So do I say that I have a list? No. But at the same time, there is... This is one of those things where you're looking at that 2 steps ahead, and maybe there's something there. I would even say that like there was some classiness to the black deck's strategies of siding Lich, was to have the fast judgment for Grim, as well as being able to do like an alternative way to deal with Gil, with like Scarlet's Agony or Scarlet's Vision and all kinds of other stuff, but also just like Bane on a 1200 defense thing is pretty relevant for a quick flip. So there was some interesting tech choices going on with some of these rulers where I'm not completely sold against the idea of seeing more sideboarded ruler strats going into this kind of potential, like, you're going to do this, so I'm going to do this, so I'm going to do this kind of thing. It could definitely happen.
I definitely think that's one option. 2 of the things that I'm really thinking about going to Minneapolis is, number one, kind of what ended up happening in Charlotte. It wasn't something I intended to happen, but it ended up happening, is just playing something that people aren't prepared for, that they don't know how to play against. Like, the Machines list that I took was very similar to the Diversity Hanzo list. It played out very similar. It plays a lot of similar cards, like you take out the green and replace it with blue. And the way that you beat the Diversity Hanzo deck is you just keep its creatures off the board and running out of gas. So he's like, you will beat Diversity Hanzo in the late game because green has no card draw, because their top decks are pretty bad, because they don't have anything in the room deck to get there. Well, the Machines list had Mystery Box, so when people like play it like it's Diversity Hanzo because that's what they're familiar with, and they're just like, oh, I've run this deck out of cards, I start to win the game, and I'm like, Mystery Box. They're like, oh, I have lost the game. And that's just kind of like, because people weren't prepared for that, they didn't even see that coming because they were so used to the Diversity list. They were just like, oh yeah, I should have played this matchup differently. I should have tried to be the aggressor. And it's hard to do when you don't, like, when you sit down for the first time against the deck in tournament and like you're playing it tested multiple times. Just something, even if it's not optimal, just something that people aren't prepared for can get you more wins than maybe it should.
Right.
And the second approach, I think, would be just to take something that maybe the matchups that you're expecting at the tournament are going to be your bad matchups, but maybe you lose them 60-40 instead of like 80-20, for example, with like Keurig Lucifer or Keurig Brunhild kind of like numbers, right? So that's one of the reasons I think Gil has actually seen a lot of success, is though, even though it does have some bad matchups in the form of Lucifer, in the form of potentially Hanzo, in the form of potentially Brunhild, like those are more closer to 60-40 matchups than they really are unwinnable. So you have a lot of agency as a player to kind of take your fate into your own hands and say, I'm up against a bad matchup, but I'm going to win it because it is possible for me to win it, right? Like, it is, I can have the potential to outplay my opponent. Meanwhile, if you play like, you know, some slow control Lucifer deck into Keurig, doesn't matter how good you are, like, doesn't matter, you're just going to get blasted. So just having the ability to win bad matchups instead of trying to snipe the matchups you expect to see is a little bit different of a strategy than I think we've actually had possible in previous kind of format.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And so I think, you know, that's the key point here is it's going to still take into effect all, like, when you're doing testing, right, is that you're still going to need to be testing a lot of stuff, which is very weird to be saying this far into a format.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at this
feels
point,
good though, doesn't it?
It does feel really good, but like at this point in time, in a lot of forcible formats, it's been like, okay, cool. What can I build to beat the mirror, right? Like, how can I tech that way? We don't get to go further, but you know, like testing. This is one of the things that I think is very interesting about. Even I know a lot of people aren't on teams, but like even the approach that Rogues Guild has taken to some of the tournaments, I think is interesting, where they always split themselves as a team across the board. But this is me saying that, like, I think that also gives credit to what this format exists, and to your point, Ryan, about your approach to what you're planning on doing in that tournament. You know, is it like they kind of split the bill in that way? Do you play the like thing that we kind of established probably has some of the best matchups across the board, knowing that you could get sniped because you have the most hate? Do you play the thing that has the most 60-40s and some pretty strong matchups and just try to go, okay, you know what, I'm going to try to outplay my way through the day? Or do you try to play like 3 steps ahead and bring some spice that no one's really you're trying to undercut and kind of get under the handle? And all of those strategies are relevant in this format, which is crazy to think about. So you have to be testing all of them.
I would point out, like, long term, we may see that for that specific team, that's just something they do on a whole. But I think that's more currently a symptom of the format we're in than necessarily a hallmark of that team. Because in previous formats where things were very defined, the split down a team when you looked at some of the teams that existed was more on individual like variations on a specific deck. Like in the Sherry meta, it was like, okay, they're like disagreeing on a couple of card choices, or one of them's like, okay, I'm playing most of the same list, but like doing this different splash for some reason. Whereas here they were on very different decks because the meta is simply open enough and presents enough different options that you can't get that many people to all agree because they're not all the same person.
Right. And I, you know, like I said, I definitely think that is a symptom of the meta. So it's cool to see that happening. We're getting a question in the list from Travis asking our thoughts about Shayla Aggro.
Shayla Aggro specifically.
So I would imagine that's like the
right?
Thunderbird Mega Thunderfish combo, where it's like your only creatures are Thunderbird and Megafish, right?
No, I think it's like the full-on tempo.
I think he's
Soaked
Panda. Yeah.
Oh, soaked panda stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's not bad. Like it's something I think about.
I've played again. Like I ran into this one in Vegas, and like it's not a list that does nothing. The problem I felt while watching it was it didn't feel like it was it was one of those lists where it was doing something powerful, but it felt like it was doing a less powerful version of another deck. And in this case, it was like, okay, it's this low to the ground deck with like powerful low drops and like tempo plays, and it's got these bounce spells that are effective at the moment. And we just described Ryan's list from the last event, only without Mystery Box or Lancelot as a board wipe.
Yeah, like, a lot of these like fringe.
Like it was a good deck that was not as good at doing the machines.
A lot of these fringe decks get plagued by being meta decks, but doing something worse, something better, and it's usually just a matter that the thing they do better is not as relevant as the thing they do worse. Like the aggressive decks, like the Shayla aggro, like the Freyla aggro, are inferior to Keurig and Lucifer respectively, because like Shayla compared to Keurig, like, well, Keurig still has Pathway Part, which is like one of the best cards in your deck, and it still has a cheap removal, but it's way more aggressive than you, right? And then like Freyla compared to Lucifer, like, okay, yeah, Freyla is like maybe a little bit more aggressive than Lucifer, but it has nowhere near like the kind of removal that Lucifer to like push through damage.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
So that's something to like kind of keep out when you are looking for like that spicy stuff. Say, what are you doing better? What are you doing worse? Like the blue machines versus the green blue machines. What was I doing better? I had better linking. What was I doing worse? I didn't have as much interaction. And because the format was a little bit more aggressive, I didn't need to be it. So.
And weirdly enough, I think this has also kind of been...
take one of his examples and add another example of like what it's doing better being not important. I would say that like what the Freyla deck is doing better is like relative to like it being a black deck was that it has almost infinite late game, so it almost can't lose the mirror, which just isn't something you can bank on to win right now. Whereas being a worse aggressive deck is something that can cost you a lot of points.
It's a bit more Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a bit more removal proof against Hanzo, I think, is the best reason to play Freyla. Sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
I think one of the other things, too, is when you're looking at these versions of a deck or, like, style of a deck where we're talking about, like, Freyla versus, weirdly enough, Freyla versus Keurig, not necessarily, but, like, Shayla versus machines or something like when you're comparing them to, this is one of the weird cases where having access to the rune deck actually does provide a lot of shore up to where that deck's weaknesses fall. Like Shayla aggro can just as easily as like machines, like if your creatures get knocked off board, sure they have a little bit maybe more protection, but if your creatures get knocked off board, you do kind of run out of steam, unfortunately. But like in having access to the rune deck, like machines are always going to have a mystery box on turn 7. if they want.
Well, and then in the interim, like if they run out of steam, they have scrap and build.
Exactly.
So rather than being like, oh, I top decked, 2-drop this turn, and I've got 4 mana sitting around. It's like, well, no, now I'm still double spelling this turn, even if I'm not using all of my mana. I'm still double spelling, presenting stuff, and this is bridging me in an effective way into this late game I also have access to.
So these Rhea cluster rulers have unfortunately kind of just been outclassed by what the rune deck has provided for what they're trying to do. Like, there's something in New Valhalla that's trying to do the same thing as them, and the thing is that because of the rune deck addition to that strategy, they just kind of shore up some weaknesses that just kind of makes it happen. Now, like, obviously that's not the case for everything. Clearly the control rule right now is like Gil, because like even talking about like Gil versus Hanzo, like if you're trying to play Hanzo like a control ruler, you might as well just be playing Gil. Like at that point, like you don't need. There's nothing that the rune deck provides to a Hanzo style control that Gil doesn't have. Like Gil's just like, I'm just gonna tutor it. Free removal, got it. Like searching any spell I want, got it. Ramp, I got it. You know what I mean?
I do want to address something in chat because we were kind of talking about like the rogue, what the rogue skill does, and like Joey and Will are talking about like they always split. And something else I kind of think influences what deck you play is just how many hours you put on it.
Sure.
When it does come down to like a skill format, like you do want to play something again. Like when I'm talking about, you want to play a deck with 60-40 matchups where you have like the agency to like win a game that maybe you shouldn't actually. Just having 80 hours on a deck versus 10 hours on a deck is going to help you play that deck at a more optimal level. But when these guys, are doing their testing, this happens with a lot of teams, like the way that sometimes decks get split across a team is because one person's the meta player and then everyone else is like throwing, spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, try and figure out like what breaks the meta. Well, it turns out that player A has now played 100 hours of the meta deck into Pandas, into Imel, into like All Hamat Taboo, into Freyla, and like now they've got 100 hours on the deck, and they're like, well, like, I'm glad you guys found out what beats it, but nobody's going to play that deck, and I've got 100 hours on Hanzo, so I'm going to play Hanzo.
Right. It's like Charlie playing Gil.
No, it's like Charlie playing Lucifer. It's the Charlie scenario.
So I think Will has been that person on Rogue's Guild specifically. I think he was like the Hanzo guy, and then he like got bullied into Kirik for the Minneapolis event. But like that kind of just happens in teams, and like honestly, playing the deck you're most comfortable with is never going to be wrong. So
also, it is like something we haven't necessarily. I don't know that we've actually like talked more than like a throwaway comment on this, but like it's also important in this format because as much as we don't like it to be, round time is not a guaranteed thing on your side in this format. Like Brandon can attest, we played through all of Vegas on Brunhild, and there were like it was like both of us played pretty fast. It was a struggle to complete, like to actually play rounds to completion and not have game one be your determiner for that deck. And so in a format where there is a deck like that, there's some other decks like, Hanzo is potent, but if you're interacting with its early Gizos, it might still pull through, but it might take it a while to do that. You need to be like mechanically proficient and like quick thinking with whatever you're playing, just so that you don't necessarily lose to the clock.
Especially on Brunhild, for sure. I mean, the deck will go very late.
Yeah, for sure. Which I think, which has also been weird because I think in, like, what's a mirror that we all expect to take forever is weirdly enough the Gil mirror. But like,
not that long. The game ends very decisively.
I don't think Will and Aaron, I think both finished Gil mirrors where they got to game 3 and won before the time was called.
Oh, sure. I mean, it can be done with any deck as long as you're playing quickly.
I think
it's more than sufficient.
Gil mirrors are deceptively quick because like it really just comes down to like, okay, like you flipped your Gil on like turn 4, sure, and now we need to start calling stones so that we can have more mana to win counter wars. And then because you tapped your Gil, we're gonna go for this combat trade. Let's see what happens. Who's got more counter spells? Oh, I've got the Winds Vitality. Your Gil is dead. The game is over in 2 turns. Like it just ends on like turn 6. Like that's just the matchup. And but because it's like 2 control decks, you think it's gonna go longer, but because the win condition is so cut and dry, it's kind of funny how it happens. It's the rune decks, it's the diversity decks that actually like have longer matchups because like you are playing so many more cards and you're like fighting for so many more resources before one player actually pulls ahead. That like any divinity deck is actually going to like take longer. So even like Lucifer versus like machines, Like when I played against Salmon Swiss, we went to the full 3 games, went all the way to time. And I actually did end up winning like on the in time, but it's like we're both aggressive decks, and like my deck wins the game on turn 7, but we still like had to play 3 full games because there's just so many resources being thrown back and forth, and like so many actions that happen.
Well, and the Rune deck adds so many extra lines of play. Like I can attest this when I mentioned it in chat earlier. Like we've thrown it out a couple times. I took Freyla to locals this weekend, and it sideboarded into Lucifer. So in doing so, I'm not changing that many cards because I've only got so much sideboard space. The rate of play of the 2 versions of the deck is very different. It's not just because I inherently changed the thing. Like it's still a deck full of 2-drops looking to punch you in the face and hit you with cheap interaction around that. It's just that the addition of all these extra lines makes things very different.
Yeah. And so I think really we've kind of gotten to the final point, really. We've kind of talked about it enough about if you're talking about how to view this meta, what steps to take. It really comes down to a bunch of different factors, but ultimately, at its core, you need to play something that you feel comfortable with, but also at the same time, you can take it 3 steps ahead, you can take it 1 step backwards. There are lots of different things, but really, in this wide open of a format, a big portion of this is going to be trying to correctly guess what people decide to go to, but even beyond that, you can hedge that by picking a deck like Ryan was talking about. I think like the safest bet is to get really comfortable with a deck where its bad matchups are 60-40s instead of like hard lose matchups. Like that's the safest option if you're not quite sure what's going to happen here. But you can go that safe, or you can get really risky, and ultimately it does come down to kind of a prediction. But the weird thing is we're kind of in a Wild West right now, where even this far into the format, I'm not really sure what's going to be the most popular thing. This is America, so probably Keurig, but you know what it is. I'll tell you, as soon as Ryan Miles, the day before the event, ships me a 40-card Keurig list that I have to build for him before I get on a plane, I'll be sure to tell everyone that he's playing Keurig. But there is a lot going on. So I think the takeaway message really is don't stop testing. Don't stop testing stuff that you haven't even thought of. Don't stop looking at cards, because it definitely can pay off.
Honestly,
after this,
sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
After the string of meeting up with the Arizona boys to test this, like we literally have not given up on anything yet. We're so ready.
Well, the nice thing is, like, we're talking about all this testing, but that's also in part because the format is rotating. So we have this sort of solved format where like the main decks are known, but they're in this loop. So that there is no like best deck. There's lots of time to test because you can't necessarily make the best making the best version of Keurig or the best Brunhild or the best Gil doesn't necessarily get you as much equity as it does in a lower deck format, because you're edging small percentages when that are only going to be helped so much. So you have this time to test wilder decks, and it's productive.
Yeah. Honestly, the best thing you can do is just be good at Force of Will generically. Just like play more games. If you pick a deck early on, that's like more power to you. But like, I think one of the biggest deciding factors in Grand Prix right now is just player skill. Like, just play more games, get better at the game, know your optimal lines first, and then worry about picking a deck. To be honest,
and then also don't forget that that Skyfall says you have to control the machine in order for it to cast.
You have to control a machine resonator.
Yeah, machine resonator in order.
Yeah.
If it was just a machine, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If only if it was control the machine, then Arthur would be so much.
Then I could easily convince Ryan to play Arthur.
Yeah, but then the memes wouldn't be there, so it never happened.
So, with that out of the way, we did kind of have a second piece that we wanted to talk to, and then it's going to involve some kind of manipulation from my part here in pulling up some lists. So give me just 1 second.
Let's talk about how bad Brandon is at mulliganing first.
Oh my goodness. Let's talk about how bad the community at whole is. Everyone except me is bad at mulliganing, apparently. That's what I learned this weekend.
What did
Ryan, did you send me that? Did you send me the list in our Discord or in our Facebook?
In our Facebook chat, I did. I can link it.
No, I got it.
Cool.
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, I think
we have some gotcha logs. So this was the idea:
Right.
is Ryan put out a post. We got
I
a
did.
few good responses
Thank you.
that asked us about. Tell us what your opening hand is, what your deck list is, what you're playing against, and then we would be going into what we thought the best mulligans would be. So I'm going to pull these up, and we're going to kind of talk about some certain ones. I'll put them on screen for us to look at in terms of the deck lists. So we'll start here with Justin Shropshire, and he sent us this list, which is a little hard to see. I'll try my best. He didn't actually send us the full gotcha log. So he sends us this list. So it's a Brunhild list, and he tells us he's playing against the Mirror, and he has his opening hand pre-mulligans is 2 Spear, Blade, Gem Mallet Panda, and Air. And it's playing the Mirror, so we're assuming cards are probably pretty similar to most of the board for the Brunhild Mirror.
Right.
And what we would mulligan in looking at this hand.
Can you say the hand one more time? I'm sorry.
It is 2 Spears of the Valkyrie,
Right.
Blade of Faith, Gem Mallet
Mhm.
Panda, Air, Gem Mallet Panda, and Air. That's our opening
Okay.
5.
And this is the mirror. Are we on the play or the draw?
I think we're. I
Oh,
think
I
in
didn't ask
most,
that.
I think in most assumptions we're on the play. We're
Yeah,
go
that's
with
the
the
same
play.
point.
All right. There is and we're playing 2 Adam in this list, right?
Yes,
Yes.
we have 2 Adams
Yep.
in this list.
Only 3 Messenger of the Sun. Don't think that's like super relevant. Like I think
Is
it's
our master rune? What's our
Oh,
master rune?
Our
Oh,
master
seven.
rune in the rune
War
deck
Weapon.
is Wrath.
hey, what's the second to last rune? Is that
That's
Ring Bolt?
the thing that makes it so that if one of your things would take
Oh,
damage,
right.
your opponent takes it
oh the
instead.
burn one. Okay. We put-
Okay, so to be clear, this list is a little bit different than mine. So my initial gut was full moon, maybe keep the panda, because this matchup really wants to see Messenger of the Sun, and if you don't see it, and they do, you're almost certainly going to lose. But this rune deck is slightly less Messenger of the Sun. Oh, I guess he's playing Ajinard, so I just don't understand this rune deck. But in most other iterations of this mirror, Messenger of the Sun is the only card that matters in the first 10 turns. So you just full mold this hand. Maybe keep the gem mallet because you're playing Adam. If you're playing Adam, so I could entertain the thought of keeping gem mallet, but otherwise.
Yeah, that's about what I was thinking too. Is like probably the only card I would be willing to keep here would be Gem Mallet.
I would keep Blade of Faith. It's also the only removal spell in the deck that actually is an answer long term to your opponent's threats.
That's
And
fair.
You don't
like
so-
things can be like we've talked about you've mentioned like it's important to reach Messenger of the Sun, but Blade of Faith is also the one thing that puts your opponent down a Messenger of the Sun forever, or down another thing that the match is all about forever. Like
So here's
in
the
my
weird
play with the
thing.
mirror, like number of Blade of Fates is not necessarily the prime factor, but is a determining factor. And I wouldn't mulligan one from my opening hand.
So here's the weird thing about this matchup, and it's kind of this might sound a little bit incongruent, but it's actually how this ends up playing out. Is if they have a messenger and you don't, you are going to lose the game. If you have a messenger and they don't, you're going to win the game. If you both have a messenger and you have a removal for their messenger, you're not strictly going to win the game, though, because they already got a lot of the value out of their messenger, and the draws off of messenger are likely to get them to it. So if you both have a messenger and you have a removal for the messenger, what's actually going to happen is this is going to be probably a game that goes to the decking out of the cards. And so eventually them not having messengers anymore is actually favored. Like there comes a point in this matchup where you don't want messenger anymore. This is getting, I really don't know how to explain this without really going too deep into the Brunhild mirror. It's a very intricate mirror, but
The other thing
I don't think you keep the blade. I don't think you care about it that much. Maybe if they're also playing Adam. Maybe if they're playing Adam.
I would say the
That's what
thought
I'm
is
thinking,
Adam's
Adam.
become a staple in these decks, so unchecked
Has to be.
Adam is another thing like Messenger that will
It's-
just win the game on the spot, and
Yeah.
Blade is your only clean answer to Adam.
It's a percentage difference between like what are the odds that they have an Adam, I get my second messenger and I draw a card, like versus if I touch that blade and have one more check at messenger and potentially have another check at the other blade in my deck. Plus you also play the Wrath in this version, and so that's just another great answer to Adam eventually if you don't hit your messenger. I kind of like Full Mole here. Full Mole / Keep Panda.
I'm thinking we only play 2 Mistletoe as well, so we are a little bit
Jeez,
lighter.
really?
We're playing a bunch of stuff like Flourishing Hope and Miscalculation main deck, because I guess we're a bit more afraid of Keurig with our local meta or something like that. That's what
Sure.
this list screams to me, with like the Messengers and the Mistletoes not being in the main. That's just what I'm gathering. We are playing against the Mirror, right? So I think that Gem Mallet Panda, we're not really ramping into anything here in the mirror specifically, and Gem Mallet's kind of a card that's going to just not actually be a card. We are going to go late, or we're going to lose because they have messengers. So I like keeping the Blade and mulling the other 4, and again, it is just to beat another Adam C card.
The only reason I would consider keeping Panda is because it is wildly powerful if we mull into Adam. Like, if you go turn 2 Adam and they just don't have an answer for it, you just feel ridiculously good.
Yeah. We want an Angel of Hope instead, though. Like, is turn 1 Angel of Hope, like, good enough? I feel like that card can go a bit unchecked and then, like, demand an answer, and then they have to use
you're right. No, you're right. Full mulligan is correct. It's just
Blade, 1 Blade for Adam.
No, send all 5. You don't keep Blade for Adam.
So, moving on to our next one.
Next one.
Is we are playing. Let me look at this.
This is the Epic Stories one, right?
No, I'm gonna come back to that one. This is
okay, we'll come back to it.
This is the Taboo Gill.
Okay.
It's making use of the fact that you get to play nothing but white stones. And our opening hand, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Our opening hand
have to read Taboo Gill.
Was
our opening hand is Viola, Forbidden Arts, 2 Gem Mallets, and the Metal Star. I don't remember her name,
Venus.
but she's the top.
and Venus. Yep. So Venus will let us potentially get a big 1-drop. Gem Mallet Panda is obviously ramp. Viola is Viola. We have absolute the Ancient Forbidden Arts, which is a 2-drop removal spell for anything. So, looking at this deck list,
this is very interesting.
Knowing that we're going to go on the play, our opening hand is, you said it was 2 Gem Mallets, a Viola, a Forbidden Arts, and a Venus?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've never played this deck, but the first thing I'm going to look at here is how am I beating Lucifer with this? Oops, God, what the heck?
Playing Blazer on curve, I guess, or head of curve. How are you beating Black Rosario? We've got 4 protection in the Eagle.
So you're going to die, your little things are going to die to Jet Black, and then anything that's not dying to Jet Black, which is most of the cards, are going to die to Rosario.
He is saying he's playing against Lucifer. That is the request, that he's playing against Lucifer.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cards here that don't matter, but I don't actually see cards that do. I guess your Guild is really good.
Right. Hold on. We can beat Jet. Oh, we can't. No, Jupiter only cancels chance, doesn't it?
So I feel like if we're playing Lucifer, like we have a certain subset of important cards, and those are the Air Orphica engine is still here. That's still one of our best things.
Oh, sure. You're right.
We still have the blue historic chant that is just a straight +1, and can +1 us into multiple Violas to play around sorcery removal, or multiple Venuses to keep stacking. Like, I believe that card's also important, and I do like Jupiter eventually. So I feel I am personally inclined to mulligan pretty heavily on this hand.
Yeah, I think I would agree.
Current list of Lucifer don't really have any do much with their graveyards, do they? Like Viola.
March of the Dead. No, March of the Dead is pretty big.
You're absolutely right. The Air Orphica is how we're winning this game. I don't actually hate Jupiter against Lucifer. I think it's actually pretty good. I think I actually keep Venus here. You always cast it on 1.
Yep.
And it blocks early and replaces it. It's like a mulligan that you're not likely to get a better card than.
It's a mulligan
I would
that has
probably
a chance of eating one of their cards.
I would probably keep Viola and the Venus. Like 1 Viola, 1 Venus.
We don't like Gemini here?
So like the only 3-drop you're looking to ramp into, like this isn't a deck where you're going to like Gem Mallet isn't going to enable you to relevantly multi-spell.
So it just dies to Jet Black, right?
Yeah, but we want to force them to Jet Black, don't we? Like, we don't want to zone up card forever.
Panda doesn't force them to Jet Black. Yeah, the Panda just gets you to another card that will die to Rosario or Jet Black. I don't think any ramp card is good against Lucifer. I mean, that's one of the joys of the deck.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think I keep Venus. I don't know how. See, like I need 2 cards for Air Orphica to be really good.
I think I keep. I think I keep Venus and Viola and ship the rest.
So Viola is good against like March, but that's not going to matter until a bit later.
I'm just thinking about how good this Blazer is on turn 3, and that's kind of why I want to keep 1 Panda. But we don't even have a Blazer, so I think it's probably correct.
I'll say, yeah. If we had a Blazer, I might be inclined to keep a Panda, but that's still a high risk keep. Like I feel like that has a lot of times where you get bit.
I'm also not entirely convinced that like turn 4 Blazer is like that insane against Lucifer. It's fine. I don't know if it's great.
It's not insane, but it's like one of the best cards because it's gonna force the Rosario where nothing else really is. And then like it's gonna take a card in the process, which is gonna be a March of the Dead, which is kind of huge. I mean, like, and it forced the Rosario, and then like once we force the Rosario, like all of our future Blazers get better. So I kind of want to Blazer down ASAP.
How many Blazers are we playing?
I'm playing 4.
Okay.
But I do think that Arrow Orphica is probably more important. So I could say, like, I do agree, like, Venus is not a better one. I'm just worried that, like, they're going to be aggressive. And then if we're playing, like, at curve, then our Forbidden Arts are not as good. And then, like, we're just going to actually die.
Forbidden Arts does not have text. I don't think we cast it against Lucifer.
Oh, we got 4 miscounts, actually. We're not getting super blasted by aggro. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah,
Let's
play Venus and throw the other 4, I think.
That's where
I
I'm
agree
at
with
as
that.
well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Next one, we're gonna go back up to our Oscars Epic Stories list.
Oh boy!
So
I have to look at 60 unique cards to figure out this deck.
And this is 60 unique cards in a 4-player multiplayer Epic Stories.
Is this it's Valhalla too? I don't know what these Valhalla rulers do.
Wait, what's the other ruler?
It is.
Geez.
He described it in the post. It is.
It's the green
Arwen.
starter deck ruler you shared with me, Brandon.
Arwen the
sure.
King.
Yeah.
Someone tell me what it does.
No, yeah, I know what it does.
I don't know.
Oh,
what it
the
does.
chat, you mean?
Yeah.
It pumps wind resonators on the front side, and when it flips, you get to put elves into play for free.
Is that the ruler flipping?
So he's playing a discard. He's playing a discard list against a discard list against a fairy flood list, and against a ancient magic ramp list.
That's got
Yeah.
Al-Hamat Soul's got to be some sort of like leaning control list.
Yeah.
So we've got
And then
2 aggressive lists and 2 control lists.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Like
And
at a high
then-
level, we've got here.
this list definitely seems like a very like aggro
Yeah, mono green, just good stuff, right?
mono green good stuff aggro
Yep.
stuff.
That's literally all it is. Mono green, good stuff. It says Tsunade in it for some reason. Is there a combo with Tsunade, I'm assuming?
Tsunade, the mini one?
Is there another Tsunade?
That is Tsunade, the 8/4, the 2-drop
Yeah.
8/4.
8/5? Yeah, no, she's just a good card, right?
Is she, in Epic Stories, just an 8/5 hexproof?
This is
I don't
someone
know.
who's really committed to playing pretty aggressive, so their hope is that she's going to get in a lot of damage if they draw her early when everyone's still doing setup stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking 2 mana, 8 attack. Like, that's where I'm at with that card, right? Like,
Yeah,
just,
So
but you start
opening
with
hand.
80 You start with 80 life in Epic Stories. I mean, like,
oh,
this is
yeah.
not...
I don't know.
So
It's also
opening
play.
hand is the 5-drop Farer, Disciples, Spirit Caller Elf, Law of Silence, and Hydro. I think you keep Hydro.
Do we? We're against the Lucifer, right?
I was saying you want to keep card disadvantage against.
Yeah. I understand the card selection argument, but it is disadvantage.
Sure. Well, there is a discard deck, I guess, is possible. Yeah.
I want to mull all of these cards. Tell me why
I
I'm
like
wrong.
7 Disciples.
That is the card I like the least, actually. Why do you like 7 Disciples?
So against new control decks, it's likely the 700 swiftness is just going to get in, and then you're going to turn it into barrier or something else each turn. Like every one of those
Barrier,
keywords has
drain,
lots of
warfare.
situation. It's a flexible card.
That's
Every
fair.
one of those keywords has relevant scenarios.
I keep Thayer, throw the other 4.
I was
Oh,
thinking
fair.
Fair was the one I was like most inclined to keep, just because it is going to be that card advantage. And one, like, what's the control they're going to do? We're going to discard it. And then,
Spirit Caller Elf combos enough with the Fair Resonator that I kind of keep that. And I have 2 Elf Rulers, so that's actually just need 1 more Elf to return Fair.
Yeah.
why aren't we
That's
just
pretty
playing Fair so we can turn the Spirit Cloud off into an even better card by making it tap?
I mean, so, the answer to that question is because Feasting and the starter deck Elf Ruler are both actually ridiculous cards.
Okay, that's
Like-
fine.
Yeah.
I accept.
Especially
yeah.
if you've
Okay,
got, like,
so we're
this is
keeping-
a format where you will go big enough to play Fair's Command and other big Anthem effects.
Yeah.
Thing is actually really good with those.
So
Sure.
we're keeping Spirit Caller and Farer. Is that what we're saying here?
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay.
If that Soul Alhamit deck is a combo deck and you're aware of that, consider keeping Law of Silence otherwise.
Yep.
Actually, why
We're
are
gonna
you even-
play.
So, like, general
Not
rule of
looking at
thumb
an
with
Iron
Mulligan for
Mirror.
a format like this, I like to keep 1 mid to late game play that I know I'm working towards, and other than that, I like to Mulligan to sculpt my early turns, because if you've built your deck pretty consistently, you will draw into spells to play. That's sort of what your deck building requirements are, and so your Mulligan decisions need to be towards making sure that you don't have basically that you and this could not be strictly correct, but basically you want to ensure that you have some early plays and then something to work towards, and you will draw to fill in the middle.
Gotcha.
Sure.
So we are going to do one more, and this is William Birch's list. He's
Wait, we need to do Charlie's list.
Charlie's gonna bully me relentlessly if we don't do his.
Okay, well, let's do Charlie's list.
Okay,
first,
cool. I was
'cause it
about
will
to
take
get
us-
shot from across
because
the
it will
country.
take less time. This
Sure.
is a
wait,
Shion
hold on.
list. This
Is
is a
this a
Shion
troll?
list, and he's playing against is a 40-card tree. His opening hand is Hook, Triple Schrodinger, Hydromonica. And his deck is 24 Schrodingers, 4 Hooks, 4 Hydros, 4 Cats, and 4
40.
40 Thieves.
So 160 feet.
Don't we keep Hydromonica and pitch everything else if I remember Schrodinger's text correctly?
I think we keep Hydro, keep 3 Schrodingers, and lose the hook, right?
No, I think we keep Hydro and lose the other 4 because we'll
Yeah,
definitely draw no more Schrodingers, but we want to find at least 140
If
thieves.
you never keep Schrodinger, your
Can someone
deck
tell me what 40
cannot
Thieves does?
possibly not draw it.
It's draw
40
2,
thieves says,
draw 2, discard 2, right?
yeah,
What? Why are we
40
even
Thieves?
playing?
because we get to put Schrodinger in our graveyard and also draw 2
Thieves is
cards.
specifically so that if you do draw the hook, you put it in your graveyard and you do your Schrodinger things.
Okay, not to take this too seriously, but I kind of thought the idea of Schrodinger was like you cast them and then block with them, cast them, block with them, and then this deck just can't lose because you're casting and blocking, and then every time the 3 in the yard are exiled, you get a thing off the top.
Yeah, but we want them in the
but you're
yard.
gonna-
So we want
you're gonna-
40 thieves because then we just get 2 in the graveyard for free and we don't lose any cards off of it.
Okay.
So like that's the card that is like the only card in our deck we care about drawing, right?
Yeah,
Well, and
I agree.
Hydro.
Don't we just
Here-
win because we're a hook deck against 40 card tree?
For the most part, but we've only got 4 Captain Hook, right? Like that's kind of a problem. Or
Correct.
maybe it's
Right.
not.
Sure.
I guess they can only low rate it. They can't like seal it like they could normally. Which they're trying to do. Yeah, I think we're looking for 40. Maybe we do want Captain Hook because then we can Cheshire Cat it back on top and then Schrodinger it, and that's reliable.
But you already have a Hydromonica, which is 0 mana, massive deck control, and draw cards with your stone base, and
But we
then
just-
put a hook on top for 1, which is 1 less than 40 Thieves.
Yep.
But, like, are we gonna rather have this Captain Hook in hand? Because like any of our hooks, right? Any of our hooks that we're gonna pull out of our deck, like we just get them out of our deck with Hydro. So
Does 40 card tree play Thoughtseize attacks?
yeah, it plays like 10.
And
So
we don't want a single hook
we
in our
don't
hand
want hook in
ever,
our
right?
yeah, I have forgotten
That's
how
actually-
40 card tree plays.
This is another reason to keep 4 Schrodinger Hydro, because if we win every time that we don't draw a hook, then we want to not draw.
But we do
Which
want
I
40
think- What?
because we don't. So our cats don't actually die because 40 card tree does not play resonators. They do not kill us. Like we have to hook them and then like hit them with things and make them
So-
die quickly. So I actually
Okay.
think we really want 40 thieves.
This is me betraying Ryan violently to go to Brandon's side,
Huh?
but I'm actually starting to come around to his side that we ship the hook and keep nothing else because the only card I really want to mulligan for, like, it's like if I find 40 Thieves, I'm either replacing more Schrodingers with Schrodingers, or I'm getting a hook out of my hand, or I'm getting something else out of my hand. The problem is, mulliganing to them is apparently doing what they're doing with in advance. I don't need to do that. So the only card I want to mulligan for is more Hydromonicas for more tutoring and more deck manipulation. And I don't think the odds are necessarily good enough that I want to tutor.
So here's
I
the
don't want
problem.
to tutor for
We
Hydromonicas.
did.
Why are we deck manipulating? What are we gonna do with the Captain Hook on top of our deck?
So
Because
what's funny
we
is Ryan.
cannot get Schrodingers in our graveyard against 40 card tree. They
Right.
do not play removal. They do not play resonators for us to run into. We cannot get Schrodingers in our graveyard without 40. Or drawing to 8 cards and discarding
All
them.
right, so you attack with the Schrodinger's cat, just let them, take the 3 damage off the top of the deck, and then you take another Schrodinger's cat and you attack your other Schrodinger's cat from both in the graveyard.
You can't attack your own creatures.
Are you sure, Jeremy?
Uh,
Yeah, no, I guess you're right.
Pretty sure.
So Ryan's absolutely correct in that we need 40 Thieves in order
So,
for this deck to work.
Counterpoint, we play 4 stones that say draw a card, so we actually can reasonably just get to 8 cards in hand discard, 8 cards in hand discard, 8 cards in hand discard. But I do think because like they play discard, and every single Cheshire Cat or like Captain Hook we draw is going to get hit with like a Look of Corruption or Glint of Insight. I think it is correct to find 40 Thieves and keep a Hydra.
Okay.
That's my
So,
special-
jump into our last one.
Okay.
This is William Birch. He says we're playing against a Shayla control deck.
Mhm.
Playing Lucifer.
Okay.
His opening hand is 2 Look of Corruptions, 2 Glints, and a Shemhaza.
Hey, we were just talking about Lucifer mulligans here. Are you? What kind of Lucifer is this?
This is
Control?
a control
Very control.
plus
Oh, very
some
control.
beans.
Oh. Yep. We
Plus
play
random
Fnatic
nature.
at 3.
We play 3 of Orazuki.
So yeah, Brandon, this is 2 commands to bring back Jones and no faith, no other, and only like 1 other low cost resonator.
What does this 1 drop?
It just
Sorry,
reveals
guys.
your opponent's hand.
Yeah, you just get to look at your opponent's hand.
It's glint knowledge.
Yeah.
It's
There's
a
a better
weird
one drops.
inclusion for deck with only 3 glints.
Hey man, we got
And then a bunch of soul prisons.
Donut
So
Dark
this is-
House.
So this isn't Deck Doctor episode. So we
Yeah,
won't
Mulligan
really-
episode. Mulligan episode.
Right, okay, so we should do a Deck Doctor episode. That'd be awesome.
That actually
Okay.
sounds super fun.
So 2 look, 2 glint, 1 Shamaza, throw Shamaza, definitely throw Shamaza.
Are you keeping all of your discard? Yeah. I
No,
feel
we're
like-
mauling.
I feel-
We're mauling 1 look.
Well, okay,
I
so here's
feel
the
like you
problem.
keep 1 pair. I feel like you
Okay,
keep
so here's
look,
the
a
problem
glint,
with
and
this
mulligan
deck.
the rest.
Is this deck is playing 20 unplayables and 20 playables, and so I'm extremely happy to keep playables in my hand because every mulligan has a 50% chance of becoming an unplayable card. So I kind of like to look
Nothing's
at
unplayable with John Doe. Oh, they're all still good. Like having a resonator.
Okay,
it's a
so 1
resonator.
mana reveal your hand. I don't want to mull into that.
That's
like-
fair.
I don't
Yeah,
want to mull into that. I also don't particularly want to mull into this 2 mana
Oberzuki.
angel with flying. I don't want to mull into Oberzuki. I really don't want to mull into other Shamazas. That card's not like, I mean, it's atrocious, but it's not like as bad as the first 2 I named. The Soul Prisons are not great against. What are we playing against? Keurig?
Shayla.
Oh,
Shayla control.
Soul Prison might be a little okayer then. Okay.
So my concern is that we're playing against a Shayla control deck, so unless we hit
We
all
want
of their-
discard, right?
Well, no. So we see. I'm not entirely sold on wanting like a flooded discard hand, simply because of the fact that they only are going to need 1 card from their deck to make all of our discard worthless.
What card?
It's called Shayla's Foresight.
Why does that make our discard worthless?
Because it's a
we're gonna-
+1.
because it lets
They
them
have a lot of
literally
+1.
recycle all of the cards that we discarded, and we wasted all of our discard.
We don't
Yeah,
care
but
if
we-
we don't
we
care if they
want
recycle,
it
but
on
those
tempo.
cards-
Jeremy,
I do care.
What?
But
The
it
card's
also
like a 3-for-1 or 2-for-1.
I'm so confused. No, Trailers Foresight literally just draws itself back. It doesn't plus at all.
Oh,
it
right.
also
I'm
puts
thinking.
a thing back on top of the deck.
I'm more worried about Thunder Wave, where they just get to like draw 2. But like, if we have discard, if we hard keep 4 discard, we look, we glint, we get rid of their card advantage generators, we keep their bad
Okay, so
stuff.
literally, if like we glint, and if they have a Shayla's Foresight in their hand, if you're really that concerned about it, we just take it. But we don't. We just leave it in their hand because them shuffling their yard back in is literally meaningless. Like it doesn't accomplish anything.
Right, but they can put like our bad 1-drops back on top of our deck, and that scares me a little bit.
It's only attacking resonators, so as long as it's not
Oh,
attacking,
okay.
it's Shayla.
Oh, so genre gets put back. It's even worse. Kind of, that's annoying. It's not good, but it's annoying.
Again,
Okay,
we can just
so
look all of this stuff away.
So
I want to find John
the
Dark.
problem I think you're forgetting here is that like almost all of Shayla's like interaction is very subjective, and we're a discard heavy hand. So like part of the advantage of being the discard heavy hand is you like do your initial looks and you just take threats, and the rest of their hand doesn't do anything, and that gives you infinite turns to glint away for
Yeah.
a massive value and set up a situation where you don't have to worry about your Jeanne d'Arc being top decked because you had access to 3 to 4 glints and 2 looks to just
I'd probably
ensure they can't touch her.
I'd probably keep Look double Glint out of this hand.
Yeah, it's funny because normally I encourage mulliganing more because oftentimes people don't underestimate how just 1 card matters in matchups, and that's actually usually how it goes. But it's funny because this is the opposite, where I'm inclined to mulligan as little as possible because half of the deck doesn't matter, and I want to keep cards that actually have text. So
I
it's like-
really want to find Astema, or else I don't think we'll actually win.
I
could be
do want to
wrong.
mulligan some because while there are some odd card like some dead cards for the matchup, I'm with Ryan. I want to find Astema with this much discard. I want to find Azazel with their threats having a lot of chance for barrier, I want to find myself some. I almost want to find myself some Belial.
Mm-hmm.
There's
I
no
think
way
I'm
you
all-
want to find Belial in your Mulligan.
Currently, I
think-
said look double glint is what I keep.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Seal of approval.
Well, definitely throwing Shamazo, so at the very least, we're only one card off.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm also
And with
on board
that-
I'll
with keeping all
respect,
three
I'll
of these cards.
respect that. I think keep the 3 is fine. I'll go with that.
Cool.
And so there you have it. There is our first round of What Do We Mulligan? I think we will try to do a deck doctor sometime, and maybe even next week. That might be a cool just topic for next week. So Vic, if
I
you're
would give
interested-
yourself a couple weeks so you have more time to build up like lists, so you have a good selection
Yep.
you can pick from.
So if you want to go ahead, I'll put it in the chat right now, the email address that you can send deck lists to, that we might, so rulerschoolcontent@gmail.com. It is there. If you
It's
want
there.
to check it out, you can send your deck lists there, and with the subject line deck doctor, and we will potentially do some deck doctoring live in a couple weeks. So thank you guys so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure, as always, talking Forceful with you guys. Looking really forward to seeing what comes out and what steps people decide to take in this meta. If you, once again, feel like supporting us on the channel, you can go ahead and check out all those links down below or consider joining as a member. Reminder, we have 22 of these beautiful Malaysian will coins available. So the next 22 people to join as a
Is that
members of the
Lady
channel.
Welser?
That's male, that's male Lucifer.
Male Lucifer is Lady Welser. We've established.
Okay, cool. So I also do have Lady Welser. I also do have Lady Lucifer. It's a little hard to focus, but I have 22 of these. To the next 22 people who join up, it's only $5 a month. It goes to support the channel. You get the name and the title, submitting deck lists to be featured on the channel, and all kinds of cool stuff like that too. So if you want to go ahead and support us, there's that little join button. It goes a long way, and we really appreciate it. You also get access to all the cool emojis, like I'm sure Ryan Miles is setting up to spam right now in the chat. So, until next time, that is a lot of little lapises.
many
Until
times
next time,
have you
though,
wiped it?
this has been myself. It is going to be a random coin. Because I only have so many of each ruler, and if I let people choose, then people will get bummed out. So you are just going to get one of the random ones from my pool of stuff. But thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, this has been myself, Jeremy Franklin, and I have been joined as always by Ryan Miles, Brandon Brimlott,
Soon to be Bishop in auto chess.
and Frank Clausen.
You have a problem.
Have a good night, everybody. Class dismissed.